Right. So now you should have, with a bit of luck, picture of two goldfinches fighting and a title. Are we okay with that,
Yes.
everyone? Okay.
Yep.
Right. So I'll just initially I'm going to show just a few pictures to just introduce myself. I mean, I know people will probably know of me, and that sort of thing. It should actually move forward. Right. Just check. He's moving. Yeah. Okay. So, some people will might know me, but for those of you who don't, sort of, I'm a photographer from Colchester. I am an Olympus ambassador, and I tend to be really a bit of an all-rounder. I wouldn't say that I'm particularly a natural history photographer, although I do quite a lot of natural history, mainly birds and macro, things like that. But I do a whole range of work. So tonight we're really focusing just on landscape and nature, and I'll be explaining, I suppose, really sort of why I use Olympus equipment. I mean, there's so many, the makes of camera nowadays. I mean, Nikon, Canon, Sony, Fuji, they're all very, very good. But I choose Olympus because it covers all the genres to me. It's particularly good for natural history, particularly good for macro stuff and things like that. But it's also good for landscape, very good for landscape. It's great for sport photography. I do quite a bit of sports photography. I don't usually sort of push that or anything like that, but I also do portraits and so I'm a complete all-rounder, really, jack of all trades, to be honest. But I just, in this talk, I'm going to be showing some of the recent pictures, talking about video and stuff like that. I used Canon for 27 years. So why did I change from, after 27 years, to the Olympus Micro Four Thirds system? Because I was very happy with the Canon system. I mean, over the years, I got some fantastic pictures from Canon. But unfortunately, sort of probably about 6 or 7 years ago, something terrible happened to me in that I became old, and actually lugging heavy sort of 600mm f4 lenses around with heavy tripods and heavy sort of cameras was just not an option any longer. This was taken, I think, about 15 years ago, and I was struggling carrying it around even then. So really, it was a case of the difference, in size, weight, and that sort of thing. So the one at the back is a 600mm Canon with a 1DX. You can't really handhold that. You've got to have it on a tripod, heavy tripod. You can't use a flimsy one. You probably usually need a Wimbley sort of gimbal head too. The one at the front was the one that I started off with. The Olympus was the Mark II, and that's with the 300mm f4 lens. And quite a few of the pictures you'll see tonight are taken with that. But it's half the weight, and the fact that I didn't have to carry a tripod around all day long was such a big advantage. And when I was changing, I made a list of the advantage and disadvantage and weighed it up. And there are definitely disadvantages of a Micro Four Thirds as opposed to a full frame. For a start, you've got a smaller sensor size. So personally, I don't find that a problem, actually, but some people will do that. There's no doubt about it. If you have a full frame camera, with a Micro Four Thirds camera and high ISOs, the full frame's going to beat it hands down. There's no doubt about that. But I think now with Topaz denoise, it's not so much an issue, certainly not for me. And one other disadvantage, although to me it's actually an advantage, is that it is more difficult to get those very, very soft, creamy, out of focus backgrounds that you get because of the limited depth of field. I find, particularly with macro photography, the advantage of the extra depth field is great. But I started to make a list of the advantages. So it's the lighter weight, being able to hand hold it without having to lug a tripod around. Pro capture, when I changed, didn't really know an awful lot about it, but I must admit I'll talk about it as we go. In-camera focus stacking, 7.5 stops of image stabilizing, in-camera ND. When I got to number 12, I just stopped. I thought, well, it was ridiculous. So one of the first things I actually photographed was at the birds up at Bempton Cliff. I went up with some friends from a camera club. We spent 2 days up at Bempton Cliffs and a day on the Yorkshire moors. and this was taken handheld with the EM1 Mark II and the 300mm f4 lens. And I've printed this one quite happily. I'm actually a permajet lecturer as well. So not only I'm obviously an Olympus or now OM system ambassador, but I'm also permajet ambassador. So I've got to have a system that I can produce really good prints, and certainly this one I can print to A3, A2 even, and it's the quality that you get is very, very good. So these were all pictures taken up at Bempton with the Mark II and the 300. And at this time, I hadn't actually got rid of. I sold the 600 f4 that I had with the Canon and that, but I did keep my one camera body, Canon camera body, and the 100 to 400 zoom. When I went up to Bempton, I decided I would take both cameras because I wasn't 100% certain how the Olympus would perform. And the first day I went out there and I shot half the pictures on the Olympus, half the pictures on the Canon. And when I got back to the bed and breakfast that night, I started to look through the images, and really and truly, I thought, well, that's it. That I won't bother taking the Canon out anymore because I can get the quality that you get from sort of the Olympus. I wasn't sort of going to lose the quality. One thing, and I'll talk about this a little bit later in more detail, but people will say about Micro Four Thirds cameras is the fact that it's a smaller sensor size, only a 20.4 megapixel sensor. You can't crop into it very heavily. People in my club say, oh, God, you can't go there. If you use full frame, you got used to cropping into pictures. Well, I don't know what that looks like on people's screen, but that is a very, very heavy crop. So this is the original. Now, I reckon it's probably only about 20% of the actual file size there. It cropped in pretty good. I mean, it looks okay. I've seen this picture projected at clubs, and it looks great actually on the screen. When you've cropped in that heavily on a file size, obviously, I think it would probably... I'd noticed the difference when I actually printed it. So I don't usually print pictures below sort of 50% crop, but up to 50% crop, not a problem. We also went up to the Yorkshire Moors on the third day, and these were all pictures taken handheld out from the car. Just have the window down on the car and just poke it, passenger side there, just poke the camera out there, handheld it. Now, my two friends who are with me both got big, long telephotos, Nikon and Canon, and they had to have their cameras on bean bags to rest them because they can't handhold them. But the fact that I can just handhold the camera, because this 7.5 stops of image stabilizing was just such a big advantage. And it was just amazing to go around and get pictures like this. I mean, this will actually print to A2, this picture, because it's more or less no cropping at all. And it was, I say, very important that I was going to get stuff that I could print and get good print quality. So I started off with the EM1 Mark II, went to when the EM1X came out, I got that. And these next pictures are taken sort of waterfalls and foxes, taken at fairly high ISOs for what you would consider Micro Four Thirds, because one of the things that people told me is that you can't crop into it, you can't put the ISO up and that sort of thing there. But I don't think it's really so much of an issue now, particularly with the OM1. My base sort of for natural history is 1600. I rarely go below 1600 because I don't find I need to. But this one here was actually on the EM1X, ISO 3200. There's virtually no noise on it at all. I have put it through Topaz, which will take, and I'll show you with the Fox pictures how good Topaz is. But these pictures all taken, because I was sitting down for a couple of hours, I did have the camera on a tripod. It's a 300mm f4, and I'm behind the bush, so the waterfalls can't see me. But the big advantage is with my old system, I was still close enough with my Canon camera that they would have heard the shutter going off. But because it's an electronic shutter, you don't get that problem. So these are all taken within a 2-hour period there. I was really quite pleased with the actual results. I thought they'd come out well. And again, with this cropping sort of thing, people will say, because I've printed some of these actually up to A3, but most of these pictures are about a 50% crop. So that's the original. Okay, that's the actual original file. So I'm cropping in probably, I would say, about 50%. But it still doesn't look too bad to me on the computer screen. As I say, I can print that to A3, and the quality is quite acceptable. So if you look at some pictures I took again with the EM1X. This was some fox cubs at a private location near Ipswich, and over a period of about 2 weeks in the evenings, I would go up there regularly and take pictures. I'll show you the hide and the setup and that sort of thing. Where their earth was here. There was this old sort of big area of bramble there, and you can see actually the grass in front of that is fairly flattened. And if you actually sort of tip is that if you out and you see an area in front of grassland where near a bush where it's all sort of flattened grass, there's a good chance then that's a sign that something's coming out there and playing, and that's what was happening. The young cubs were coming out there, staying fairly close to the earth. Now I'm set this hide up. I'm probably about, I don't know, 40 foot away from it. They accepted the hide without any problem. Some nights they would come out, some nights they wouldn't. And I'd manage to get some great shots, but because these were probably taken about 7:30, 8 o'clock in the evening, the light level is really starting to go, but I could still push the ISO and get some really quite acceptable shots. Now, all these pictures here will have been through I just run them through Topaz denoise AI, and the fact that they're on a high ISO just takes it out completely. So I think people who argue the fact that Micro Four Thirds cameras are noisy is not an issue anymore. This one was 2000 ISO, which I wouldn't think twice of on the OM1, but on an EM1X, you will probably find they're a little bit noisy at times. But I was really quite pleased with how the pictures come out. So just to show you the difference between Topaz denoise and not Topaz denoise. Now that's picture there. There's one that's had Topaz denoise on it. Now that's the actual, more or less the full frame of the picture. Okay, this foxglove was just sitting there watching me and that sort of thing. So what I've done is I've actually cropped into probably, I reckon that's about 1/3 of the file size there. Yeah. So now here you can see, zooming in very, very tightly, you can see the top part does have no noise reduction, but the bottom part I put through Topaz and it's just gone completely. So there, people say about, noise is a problem. It's not anymore. I really don't I'll regularly shoot at 4,000 ISO, 5,000, 6,000, 4, and even higher than that. So is it any good for macro photography? Well, yes. A lot of the macro photography I used to do when I was using Canon, I would always have it on a tripod. In fact, I used to do a lot of studio stuff where, I could actually control it in the studio. But with the Micro Four Thirds, the big advantage was the extra depth of field. But also, and I think probably the best part, is being able to photo stack in camera. And I use that an awful lot, and not having to use a tripod. So how close do you need to be when you're doing macro photography? This is a shot of mating 6 burnt moths, 6-spot burnt moths. Now, I know that when they're mating like this, they're not going to fly away. They're not going to there's no worry about me scaring them. So with a 60mm, I've probably got to get a frame filling shot, even though it's a 60mm or 120 on full frame. I've probably got about 10 to 12 inches away to get it. Now I know they're not going to fly away, even though it's the middle of the day, because they're locked together, they're mating, they're not going to go. Now, if that was middle of the day and it was just a solitary butterfly and it was hot sunny day, and we've all had days where you try to photograph butterflies, you can't get anywhere near them. They're like they're on LSD or speed or something. They're just hyperactive. In those situations, what I'll use the 40 to 150 with a 1.4 converter. So then I can photograph from 5 foot away, and I can get more or less the same image size, yeah, in the viewfinder from 5 foot away with that lens combination that I'll get with the 60mm. So those are two lenses I use for macro. Now this is one taken actually last Saturday. It's a Heath Artillery, and it was shot with the OM1 and the 60mm handheld. I wasn't even looking through the viewfinder. I just got the flip out screen to the side, and I'd compose it on that. And it was 8 shots at differential of 3 and shot wide open at 2.8. And I find actually taking sort of initially when I first started using Olympus, all my stacking shots I would do on a tripod. But providing you use a fast enough shutter speed, I mean over 250 of a second, because it's taking 8 shots, but 250 so just press it once, it's done. You don't get any subject movement. So this is another one just taken handheld, and it's 8 shots stacked at a differential of 3. And I find handheld photo stacking very, very useful. This was one that I, as a photo stack shot, again on the OM1, but this one was actually, I did actually have this on a tripod because I was using the 60mm, but I was using extension tube to actually get really in close. So the lens here is probably only something like about, I don't know, 1.5 inches, 2 inches away from the subject there. You can, do them further away. You don't need the extension tube. One of the big advantages doing macro is when they're coated in dew is that you don't have any worry about them flying away, provided you don't touch them, knock the dew droplets off them. You get really, really close to them. So it's a case of getting up early in the morning and going out there and just sort of wandering around and looking for subject. So it's one of my, if I think there's going to be a heavy dew, I'll get out there. But on hot sunny days, when we've all seen days when butterflies, you just cannot get anywhere near them. Now this shot here is a swallowtail butterfly taken up at Strumpshaw Fen. It was taken on the Mark II, and it was taken with the 300mm with a 1.4 converter. So I'm probably about 12 foot away from it. And this was taken at something like about 7:30, 8:15 in the morning, because the forecast was very, very hot. Daylight we're going to have today and tomorrow. In those situations, you've got to get up early in the morning to get anywhere near them. But even still, when it's really hot and they're active, that extra working distance is a big advantage. And one thing I try now to do more is actually photograph butterflies in flight and action sequences. This one here is Painted Lady. Here you can see, anyone knows anything about it will know that this is just taken off. I didn't sort of track it as it was flying around there. The giveaway thing is the actual proboscis. It hasn't been curled back underneath its head. Same again on this one. This was a case of using pro capture, and I'll talk about that, showing pictures of birds and that sort of thing. And if there's one thing about the Olympus system that has really made an awful lot of difference to my photography, or improved it and enabled me to get shots I've never got beforehand, is pro capture. And this particular brimstone butterfly was on the purple loosestrife. It was nectaring there, it landed. Now I locked onto it. I was using the EM1 Mark III, 40 to 150 to 1.4 converter. and I locked onto it, the autofocus, half pressed the shutter button. I had the Pro Capture running, bearing in mind this is on a Mark III, so you're only going to get 18 frames, on Pro Capture Low. And it was really a case of waiting for it to go. And the trouble is, if you do it sort of normally speaking on my old camera, by the time I'd seen that go and my brain had said, press the shutter button, the thing would have been out of the picture. But the fact that you get this burst of pictures before you fully press the shutter button just opens up, a whole new sort of era of photography that you normally wouldn't get. And it really is, for me, it was just a game changer. Now, I'd managed when I was using Canon, when I changed onto Olympus, I'd heard about Pro Capture, didn't really, I thought, well, I've managed for 27 years without it. Surely it sounds good, but I mean, will I use it that much? Probably not. Once you start using it and realize what it'll actually do, you think, God alive, how did you manage without it? This is a shot of two woodpeckers, and this was a burst with Pro Capture. So this was another one using Pro Capture. This is taken, I got a hide about 10-minute drive out from Colchester, and there I actually sort of do a lot of bird photography. And this was from a ground level opening on the hide, so I'm down very low. The lens is only about 12 inches off the ground, and this is again a crop from a burst of pictures. Now I'm using the OM1 for this, 50 frames a second SH2 Pro Cap. And what's happened is, when you're using Pro Cap, you have to you don't really know which way it's going to fly. It might fly left or right. Unfortunately, a lot of the time they fly away from you, but on this occasion it flew towards the hide. So it's just a case of half pressing it when it's on the ground, and as soon as you see it fly, you fully press it and you get that range of pictures. So here, this is just the sequence as it takes off. Now that actual is quite a nice shot. I mean, I could crop into that and it's quite a nice shot, but when you're doing a burst of them, that's again another one that you could actually crop into, and it would really give quite a good shot there. This one not so good. The wings are too tight together there, but this one is the one that I like best of all. So this was out of the burst there by now, and it would carry on. You'd get a series of pictures as it's going out, and then you'd have sort of, so when you've got this burst, people say to me about Pro Capture that, God, it must take you ages to sort through the pictures. It doesn't actually. You just have to be sort of aggressive in your, you just go through them. I use Lightroom. Any I don't like, I press an X. When I see one that I think, oh, that's worth saving, I'll press a P, and that saves it. And then you look through it, and this was, of the sequence, was the one that I thought was best. And then again, this is one, although I probably, just going back, that's probably, I don't know, it's a, I don't know what percentage it is, but I can still print that to A3 and still get a very, very acceptable result. So without Pro Capture, I wouldn't have got that, because when it flew, by the time my brain had said to my finger, oh, crikey, press the shutter button quick, the thing would have been out of the frame. So it's just a great system. So landscapes and seascapes, a great advantage for the quality you can get for landscapes is amazing, and the advantages of live ND, which I do use a lot for seascapes and that sort of thing. The HDR setting is very, very good, and also it has high res mode. Now this is a shot taken on I think it was the Mark III. This was a shot taken handheld, where actually, just get rid of that thing up at top. Right, so this was the Mark III, 12-40, 2.8, ISO 200. We went down to Cornwall. We were stopping in Bude, and when we was driving down, the conditions, the light looked as though, well, good chance we might get a sunset. But the fact that I can quickly, now the light was starting to go, but the fact that I can work very quickly and not have to mess around using filters and things like that, and this was another one. This isn't a stitch shot. It's just one that I have actually sort of cropped and stretched slightly, and this was 1 second at f11. So being able to hand hold at 1 second is quite amazing, because the image stabilizing is so good. This one was actually on a tripod. This was actually the outdoor swimming pool at Bude, and this holiday I got some very, very nice sort of, we go down to Cornwall quite a lot actually, and every couple of years at least. And this was one taken just on a walk along the beach at St Michael's Mount. That particular evening, you had some quite nice sort of colours in the sky. Handheld. This was the 8-25mm, I think. Yeah, it was the 8-25 at 8mm. And again, a second exposure, being able to hand hold without actually sort of using sort of a tripod and able to keep. I do use tripods. Certainly, once I start going over certain sort of shutter speed, I'll definitely use a tripod. But this one here was a shot again taken from that particular holiday. This is a place called Dollar Cove down in Cornwall. The location I've never been to before actually, and it was one evening when it was a really, really stormy night. I didn't actually think I was going to get any colour, but that particular night there was some very, very nice colour in the sky coming through. And again, just waiting for that water to come in. As it recedes and starts to go back out, press the shutter button. So this was 1.3 seconds. That was actually on a tripod on that occasion, and it was ISO 80, 1.3 seconds, but I was using ND16. Now, live ND facility on the Olympus camera is very, very good, because it enables you to change exposure values very, very quickly. Now, if you just use filters on the front of the camera, you take a picture with, say, a 4-stop ND filter on, then you want to change it. You have to take the filter out, put it away carefully, get a different value sort of filter on there, slot that in there, have to then check that you haven't moved the camera slightly, or knock the focus out or anything like that. Then take the picture, then you have to take the filter out. But the fact that you can just quickly go from different sort of exposure values gives you a whole range of different effects on that. This one here was one that was taken at in Snowdonia. It's a place called Llyn-y-Duarcyn. And this was one of those occasions where there was quite a bit of wind, that there was quite a chop on the water. And even at a second, you're going to get some ripples on the water. And although I did take pictures like that, I felt that they would work better with a smoother, flatter thing. So this was actually on a tripod, 10-second exposure, ND64. Okay, so it's almost like using a 6-stop ND filter. ISO 200, 10-second f8. I did actually have a polarizer on the front, so that also enabled me to get the longer exposure and rich and emphasize the color. But I find that it's very, very useful. Now, this one here was actually using the HD facility in the camera. Now, although I could have actually got, there was enough detail in the sky to have got this sort of shot as a raw file. You just pull the sliders back and that sort of thing. I decided I'd try. I hadn't really used the HDR facility on the camera, so this was one where it will take the 4 shots, and you end up with a JPEG stack shot. And I was actually really amazed at how well it worked. It really worked, providing you could not got too slow a shutter speed. Handheld this was, and these ones were again handheld, sort of HDR. And it's one of these things I hadn't really used much until the last holiday, or last 2 holidays. And this was one evening at Saltburn Pier. This is looking towards the wind farm out near Redcar. And that particular evening we went down and we had some absolutely fantastic light. And this was taken from up on the pier. You can use a tripod, but I tend to like to work quickly. So I'll take a shot here, then I'll move slightly, perhaps include a bit more sky, a bit less sky. So I've got lots of different options. And if you're using a tripod, it takes a long time to keep having to readjust. So this was just sort of the HDR facility, HDR1. And if I find that there's a hell of a lot of contrast, and I'll put it on a tripod, I will actually use the one where it takes the 5 or so different exposures, and then I blend them on computer. But this one would just work sort of stacked it in camera, blended them all in camera. But certainly if there's a hell of a lot, if I'm doing a sunrise where you might have, say, 6 or 7 stops difference between the exposure on the sky and the foreground, then I'll probably use, HDR, 5 shots, different exposures, 2 stops apart, and blend them. So can you crop into an image? Well, I have covered this, but just want to show you a couple more examples. This one here, I mean, I don't know what that looks like on your computer screen. It doesn't look too bad for me. And I've actually had this picture in a talk. So, I mean, I do a lot of Zoom talks, but I also do talks where I'll go to a club, either show prints, which I prefer actually, or I'll actually sort of project the picture. And I've seen this one projected a few times, and it looks pretty good projected, but it is an absolute huge crop. It was really just a test to see how much I could crop it. So that's the actual sort of, original shot. Now, I reckon that that's probably only something like about 15% of the actual file size. But it's still, when you've worked it up, you adjusted the levels, sharpened it perhaps a little bit, and that sort of thing. It still don't look too bad when you consider it's come from that. So I don't have too much worry. Now, I wouldn't bother trying to print that because it's such a small file size. But this was one that is quite a big crop, and I have actually printed this to A3. And it's surprisingly good. It really is. This is a lesser white throat. It was taken sort of with the EM1X. That's the full frame size of it. It wasn't my hide, it was someone else's. And it was from his hide, and it was a 300mm f4 with a 1.4 converter. Even still, the bird was quite small in the frame. So I'm having to crop in. I probably cropped in a little bit too tight, actually. But it was at least, I would say, probably more than actually 60% has been cropped away. Probably even a little bit more than that. But then when you actually sort of get that on the screen, you can see loads of, I mean, the eye, the beak's pin sharp, the claws on the actual branch are pin sharp. I'm constantly amazed by, how good it is. So how high can you actually go with an Olympus system? Well, the first real test that I did with a Mark II was a live rock concert, and this is actually Steve Hackett. It's photographed at Cliffs Pavilion, and I'm shooting from up in the balcony with a 40 to 150 2.8, and it's shot at 2.8. And the big advantage of that was that, for one thing, it's a small camera, so you can smuggle it in quite easily. It's not a big camera and lens. But I could more or less get the whole stage in at 40mm, but at 150mm, I could sort of close in tighter on different people in the group and that sort of thing. But these are ISO 1600, which on a Mark II, I hadn't really gone too much higher than that. This was another one. Here, I'm actually using a 12 to 40mm 2.8. Now, on this occasion, I'm about 3 rows from the front. And the big advantage of a zoom lens that's 2.8 throughout the range is that I can do this shot. This is a group called the Musical Box, again, Cliffs Pavilion, Southend. I can get the whole stage in at 12mm, but then sort of I can zoom in. It's still 2.8, still ISO 1600. And I can get in tighter on individual members of the group. So these are all on Mark II, and they were all on ISO 1600. But one thing that I used to do a lot of when I did a lot of sports photography, was indoor sports photography, things like boxing, table tennis, and that sort of thing. And this was actually taken, chap called of some, I think it's Brian Fleming, his name is. He's a German, and this was actually the World Championships of Ping Pong at Alexandra Palace. And this was again the Mark II with 40 to 150, 2.8, ISO 5000. But I have put it through Topaz, but the quality actually isn't bad at all. One disadvantage is that if I was shooting this with my full frame, the people in the background, I could have blurred them a little bit more. But you know, I mean, it's not a perfect system, but it's pretty damn good, I can tell you. And this is one taken with a 12 to 40. Again, indoor lighting, ISO 4000, and thousandths of a second, and you need 800th a second, thousandths of a second for this sort of sport, because it is very, very fast, but the light levels are pretty grim, so you've got to put the ISO up. So you just do a few recent images, and one of the problems I now have as far as photography is, do I shoot stills or video? So I was saying about this hide that I have. It's about 10-minute drive away from my house, so I can go there regularly, and I get lots and lots of opportunities for, I've got a feeding station there. I can get lots of birds coming in and that sort of thing. And these are ones that have been taken over. I think virtually all of these have actually been taken this year. This is a brambling, probably a little bit tight in the frame. I could have cropped it a little bit too much there. This one here is a black cap. That was taken with, and the last one, this one and this one were taken with the 150 to 400. Now, I bought that towards the end of last year, and it's an absolutely amazing lens. Now, this is the 150 to 400 with the 125 extender on, and the quality you can get from that 150 to 400. I'll talk about YouTube in a minute. One of the things that I'm going to do now is actually do a video where I'm showing actually the pictures that I take with a 150 to 400, and also the 100 to 400. I don't have that lens, but I'll borrow it from a friend who's got one. And this, because it's fairly local to me, I can go over there and spend a few hours there and get some shots. This was probably one of the better ones that I've had sort of there recently. Again, photographed from the ground level hide. What you can't see is behind that little clump of dead grass there, there's a small hole I've dug in there, and I've put some food in there, and that one bird was eating away at it. Another one came down there, and often as not, that's what will happen, is they'll fight. And that's, recently you had a lot of jackdaws and rooks coming in. It's that time of year where there'll be young jackdaws about, and they're coming in regularly to food and things that I'm putting out there. Unfortunately, they tend to push the smaller birds away a little bit, but it won't last that long. And I've actually had rooks coming down, so that one I was quite pleased with. Also photographed recently skylarks. Where I live, there's a field out the back, and literally 10-minute walk from where I live. And I can go there and photograph skylarks. The important thing is to do it early in the year. Don't wait until now. They're still there, but the grass is too high and you don't see them very, very easy. You can still do flight shots, but get there early, March, April time, when the grass is low. They're easier to spot. And this would be with the OM1 150 to 400. I use all focusing points selected. This would actually be SH2, which is 50 frames a second, and I have birds selected in the menu. I don't use continual autofocus and tracking. I did initially when I had the OM1, but I just now use, providing I've got birds selected in the menu, I find just continual autofocus works just as well. And these are just a couple of recent pictures from a couple of weeks ago. This was up at a hide up in Yorkshire. A bit of a scrap between a jay and a kestrel. And And with this, again, Pro Capture, so I got a whole sequence of about 14 pictures where they were fighting. But probably the most recent pictures I've taken is I went up to Yorkshire, and we photographed a cuckoo. Went up with a friend from the camera club and managed to probably get one of the best shots I've ever taken of a cuckoo mating. And this was just pure luck. I mean, I was in the hide. We'd only been there a few minutes. In fact, I'd only more or less just switched the camera on, and this one landed on a post. So I locked onto it, and all of a sudden a male landed on there, and I got a whole sequence. And that was one of the more recent YouTube videos that I've done. So just talking about YouTube, I started doing YouTube videos about 2 years ago. Really, I was encouraged by Mike Lane to have a go at it. And I quite enjoy doing them, although there are a lot of hard work. But you know, it's something, a different avenue to do. And now when I'm taking pictures, I think, should I actually be taking stills? Should I be taking video and that sort of thing? So I'm going to show you a 3-minute video clip, and then we can have questions. So this should play with a bit of luck. Right, so this is a woodpecker, green woodpecker. Now, I didn't realise that actually green woodpeckers eat apples, what they do. But this is shot at normal speed. And if you look, you can see that it almost looks as if it's too fast. Now, that 4K 60, I've slowed it down to 50%, and it looks to me more normal, more natural. Because I think when you're doing video at normal speed, sometimes it looks too fast. Big advantage of shooting 4K video is you can slow it down to half speed quite easily. One disadvantage of the Olympus for me is that when I actually put it on slow motion, this wasn't slow motion, this was actually 4K 60 frames a second, so the autofocus is working. But if I actually set it on slow motion, I've got to focus manually. I just wish it would actually. I hope that when they bring out a Mark II. So this is shot in slow motion, and this was actually sort of 240 frames per second. I'm focusing manually, got the camera on a tripod on a video head in my hide, and the starlings are coming down and bathing at the pond. But if you watch that at normal speed, it just looks too fast. But slow it down and it looks a lot more natural, and it looks almost normal, to be honest. But this one was coming down and really having a very, very good splash about. And this pond sort of that I've put in there is new. Haven't really got it quite right yet. We do get a lot of starlings coming in at the moment, absolutely masses of them. And this is the communal bathing that they have, you know, where they're all splashing about. This was another YouTube video I did where I show how sort of photographing swallows. And this was a puddle that I created. That wasn't there when this is in a car park. And I actually just took a number of containers along with water in, because I knew that the birds would be coming down there collecting nesting material from mud and that sort of thing and splashing about. So I'm photographing these from the car. And but actually I find shooting video very, very enjoyable nowadays. This is a more recent one. These are starlings, again, sort of part of the last video that I did where they're fighting. And again, I pre-focus because I can't use autofocus on that. And finishing up last of all, this is shots taken, a little video clip taken with the EM1X on the 40-150. And this was sort of at the hide, you saw the stills that I showed earlier, and this was just wonderful to watch. They were so quite close to the hide because I had this set up there, the 40-150, because you never know how long they're going to be there, whether the frame is going to be right. But this was just a nice, but it was interesting watching them fight. And although you can take still pictures, it doesn't always convey quite what you want to convey, like a video will. So that's the end. Okay, hope you enjoyed it, and I'm going to stop sharing, And anyone's got any? Oh, there's a few questions in the chat.
Well, first of all, I just like to say to Roger, thank you very much for showing us all those superb images and giving us some very interesting insight into the move from full frame to Olympus OM system. And certainly one of the things which you've left with me is the fact that I don't know about everyone else, but I certainly need to use or get more used to using some of the more computational photography features like Pro Capture and things like that. I'm a bit lazy in that respect, but a bit of effort and a bit of dedication and practice, and it promises to open up a whole new world if you haven't already done it. So there you go. That's one of the messages that has sunk in from your presentation.
Okay.
We don't have a great deal of time. I really want to finish on the hour if possible. I mean, we've got 10 minutes roughly. Philip has posted a couple of questions. So Philip, do you want to ask your questions to Roger? Philip D, Philip Doorbell?
Philip has put.
Hi.
There you go.
Hi, Roger.
Excellent. Hello, Philip. Yeah.
Excellent presentation. I've got to remember what I asked now.
Okay.
Do I use denoise before you crop? No, I always use denoise. When I get the full frame and I'll denoise it then, and then I'll decide to crop afterwards. So when I've done the levels and everything there, I'll put the denoise on and then I'll decide whether I'm going to crop. Sometimes I'll do it after the crop, but it's always nice to have the full frame, because sometimes you crop it and then you think, oh, perhaps I didn't crop it quite right or anything like that. So normally speaking, when I've edited the full picture, then I'll put the denoise on. And you also said, what do you get as raw file when you do HDR?
That's right.
With HDR1, it will just give you a JPEG, and you don't get the separate file. So it will take 4 pictures, process them, and then you just get the one picture. So you don't see the 4 pictures that it's taken, but it is a JPEG. But sometimes I'll do both. I'll do it like that because it gives you an idea what it's going to look like. But then sort of often as not, I will actually take it where they're separately. And then when I download them onto the computer, I can then use Lightroom to blend them. If there's a lot of contrast, you might need 5 or 7 shots, the range through it. So then but it certainly, sometimes it works straight out of the box, the HDR one, but often as not, I'll use the one where I'm actually sort of going to take a few more frames and keep them separately, because then you've got the option. Okay.
Oh, great. Thank you. Thank you.
Happy with that, Philip?
Yeah, very happy.
Next up is Bill Dennis. I can see you.
Hello, Bill. All right.
Turn your microphone on. Yeah, there you go.
Hi, Roger.
Yeah, thank you.
Great presentation.
Thank you. Yeah.
I was looking at your live ND shots, which were fantastic.
Yeah.
I wondered, do you use manual or shutter priority for that?
Sometimes I'll use both actually, but more than likely I'll use manual, to be honest. And it takes a little bit of getting used to live ND. But initially I just used to use it all on shutter priority, but I find actual manual is probably better. There's a very, very good OMD1 sort of a landscape sort of guide by Phil Norton. You can buy it and you download it. It's absolutely excellent. It explains live ND and all the high rares and everything there in great detail. But it's a chap called Phil Norton, and he's done this OM1. He's one of the best landscape photographers in the UK, and he uses OM1, and he actually goes through it in great detail with examples, so it's well worth it. Yeah,
that's great. Thanks.
Yes.
Okay. Thanks for that question, Bill. Next question we have in the chat is from Paul Francis. I see Paul is there. I don't know whether you've got video, Paul, but if you'd like to ask a question.
Yeah, I'm Mr. Invisible today. Sorry about that.
That's
That's
all right.
okay. Yeah.
Great presentation. Thanks. Very inspiring and very interesting. I was just curious about your workflow, Roger, whether you just use Lightroom, Photoshop, or whether you use anything through the OM workspace at all to
Yeah.
get the quality of images that you use for printing.
Yeah, I use Lightroom and Photoshop because it's something that I've always used and I'm used to. I have actually used OM Workspace. I just found it not quite so easy to use as Lightroom. Although people do say that the actual noise, I think David Smith has said to me that the actual noise reduction on OM Workspace actually is better for the Olympus files than actually Lightroom. But I found that Lightroom and Photoshop, and it's just a case of one or two people have said on my YouTube channel, said, why don't you make a video where you show pictures from shooting to finish, where you actually take the picture but then show what you actually do with it on the computer. So that's something I might do in the future. But it's not something I've done as yet. But yeah, I use Lightroom. I only take the luminance slide, the noise reduction, up to about 20. I don't go past that in Lightroom because I think it can look a little bit false then. And then work it up in Photoshop, crops, levels, whatever, and that sort of thing. Perhaps a bit of burning, dodging, maybe the odd bit of cloning and that sort of thing. And then I'll put Lightroom on it and that sort of thing. But yeah, I use Lightroom and Photoshop.
Okay, yeah, I'd definitely be interested in a video shot to print.
Yeah, a lot of people have actually said to me about that, so it's something I think I might actually do.
No
the next one I'm going to do is actually using or comparing the 150 to 400 to the 100 to 400 and ask really, I mean, is there 5 grand difference between the two lenses? So that would be quite an interesting one. But
yeah, thanks very much, Roger. Thank you.
Cheers. Yeah, no problem. Yeah.
Okay, thanks for that. Peter Archdale next. Peter, would you like to speak?
Sorry, I missed the start of your.
No problem.
No problem. You're
very
here
good,
now.
though.
That's the most important thing.
Thank you. Just on like you, I'm finding I'm using video more. I find choice of file type and frame rate, etc., vexatious, to put it mildly.
Yeah. I mean, although I was saying how good the OM1 is and that sort of thing, and I just wish the video focusing was better. It's just so difficult sometimes. It's been frustrating. For stills photography, it's great. I mean, but video is more difficult, and it's something that I struggle a bit with myself. But generally speaking, if I'll probably shoot sort of, if I think it's going to be moving around a lot, I'll just use 4K video and hope the autofocus, because there's no way I'm going to manually keep something manually focused that's moving an awful lot. But if it's more or less in the same plane, I might stand a decent chance. But I know that apparently the Sony A1 I think is better for video than I wouldn't say it's a huge better, but I know that I just wish the video facility was better on the OM1 than it is. But it's not bad. I mean, you saw them clips there, but what one to use and all that sort of thing, very, very difficult. But yeah, I can understand how I find the video a little bit frustrating.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Andy, who everyone might know on the forum as Shenstone, has made a comment. I don't think it's a question, but he basically
no, it was a question. It was a question, Ian.
Oh, it was. Okay, far away then.
The Live ND, I've only just got the OM5 and just starting to look at this functionality. There's two options. You talked about the ND number, but the other option is the simulation. Do you find the simulation view useful, or do you use the standard view?
No, I just use the standard view. I don't really find it sort of. I did play around with it a little bit at first. Gives you an idea, But I mean, I personally don't use it. I know some people do find it very, very useful, but it is a very, very good facility. But again, it's something that hadn't even considered really sort of years ago, you know, something. But the fact that you know, when I do talks to Camera Club, and I say, well, actually, this camera's got sort of ND filters built into it, so you don't have to keep changing filters on the front of the camera. But live simulation, I did play around with it for a little while, but I found in the end didn't really do it for me somehow.
Great, thank you.
Yeah,
Thanks for that one. We'll just take one last question, which is from David Hall. Who I think
hello, David. All right. Yeah.
We all know David is Sapper on the forum.
I know David, yeah.
Presentation as usual. And a question really about your printing. What printer do you use, and do you print from Lightroom?
No, I print from Photoshop, but the printer I use is a Canon Pro 1000. It's an A2 printer, although I do still do a few A2 prints, but mainly the reason I bought the bigger printer was, one, it was on special offer, and it was on a very, very good offer. I got it when I got it, but also the fact that it's got bigger tanks in it, so they're more expensive, but they last sort of so much longer. I think with the printers where they've got these small cartridges in, that they reckon they're virtually one of the most expensive sort of things on the planet, and they just seem to go through them like wildfire. But the bigger tanks last longer. So I use a Canon 1000, but I found Canon. I used to use Olympus for an Epsom for a number of years, and never had any problems with it at all. But I've had no touch wood, no problems with the Canon. Canon's very good.
The reason I ask is because I use a Canon Pro 10.
Yeah.
And I print from Lightroom, and I have done for ages, and it worked. And then
yeah.
On an A3 Plus,
yeah,
put it in half
and
size, and
yeah,
all of a sudden it won't recognise that now. So it's a bit of a faff. So
right.
Good printing from Photoshop. So maybe I'll try that.
Yeah. Does anyone use Permajet paper or anything?
I use Permajet.
Right. If you buy the paper from Permajet, not from Wex or London Camera Exchange or anything like that, when you go, and not the Imaging Warehouse site, because I didn't realize that's actually, although it is partly owned by Permajet, it's actually different, but it's on the Permajet website. But if you buy paper there, when you go to the checkout page, if you put in capital letters all joined together, Roger Hance 20, okay, so it's all capital letters, all joined in one, no gaps, Roger Hance 20 in capital letters, it'll actually take 20% off your cost, and also it will send it to you postage free. So anyone uses Permajet, it's worth it, you know. So just on the checkout page on the Permajet website, put that in there. It'll ask you for a voucher code or discount code, and it'll takes, you know, it's not a lot, but it's all helps, isn't it?
Thank you.
Wow, that's a great money-saving tip, and we might mention that on the forum so that other people can know about it.
Yeah.
So thank you very much, Roger. That was a great presentation. I think we all enjoyed it, and you know, it's fabulous to be able to invite one of our own members to present. It's nice to have a member who's an OM system ambassador, and somebody as accomplished as yourself. So thank you very much.
Okay, no problem. Yeah.
And please do visit Roger's website and his YouTube channel. It's well worth a visit. And I'd just also like to mention that this isn't a one-off. We did a lot of webinars during COVID, and they kind of died away a bit. But I have another guest lined up for 3 weeks' time on July the 16th, and that's Rob Trek from across the pond. So I'll be publishing more information about that in the next few days, and I'll look forward to that one as well. So anyway, thank you very much, everyone, and see you on the forum.
Okay, all the best then.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.